Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Evan Sanchez, founder of new Grad Launchpad, where he helps parents of young adults learn how to talk to their children without falling into the trap of constant advice. We'll learn from him, explore with him why advice often feels like pressure, how to shift from fixing problems to building trust, and practical ways to create the psychological safety your child needs to move from stuck to confident independence. Welcome to the show, Evan.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Evan. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about parenting beyond advice, building trust with your adult child. So how to do that. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Sure. My name is Evan Sanchez. I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I grew up here a long time ago, back in the Stone Age. And, what I found, growing up is that, my parents were lovely. They're awesome, but they weren't always, great at when I got into my 20s and what to do. Because that's really the scariest time, because we all have these, timelines of, going to grade school, then going to, high school, then going to college. And then after that, it kind of gets nebulous. And that's where we really need our parents to step in. And, my parents were great, but they didn't really step in the way that would have been the most effective. And this is what I find in coaching a lot of parents, is that they're stuck in this, they're using the same rules that they used for their kids when they were growing up. And they're using those same rules for childhood as they are in adulthood. And now that your child is an adult, right, the game has changed, and nobody really talks about that. Nobody really talks about the fact that you can't just give advice anymore and they will take it. They will most likely not take it. And, and it may even start as early as the teens where they stop taking your advice. And it's really hard to get past that. And so, there's always this phase, especially when they go into college, they know better than you. You're dumb now. You're not a smart parent anymore. And for those of parents who are listening, I know that they can probably relate. But what we do is we say, well, now that you finish college, here's what you should do. You should go out and network, and you should go out and get a job, and you should go out and do this, and you should go out and do that. Go back to school, get a graduate degree. They're full of advice. And what happens when someone's an adult is that they don't take advice. They don't take advice readily. Not as readily as they did when they were a kid. When they were a kid, they said, don't touch the hot stove. And they're like, okay, I won't touch the hot stove. But it's a different ball game now, where your adult child is independent. You want them to be independent, but you're also still giving them the advice like they were little kids. And so what happens when you give advice to an adult, actually any adult, really, if it's unsolicited, it's probably going to be met with resistance. They're probably going to put a wall up and say, nope, or they're going to feel like, especially for your adult child, they're going to feel like you're shaming them in some way, or you're passing judgment on them. And so you can imagine what type of resistance that creates in your adult child. They just are like, they don't want to hear it from mom and dad. They're like, I'm done with you. I know better than you. And so how do we handle that as parents? Especially if they're going through, what I call the quarter life crisis, which is like, they've probably tried a few things. Maybe they're in a job, maybe it's fulfilling, maybe it's not, but they kind of like don't feel in alignment with what they're doing. They're getting a paycheck, but it's not really fulfilling them or moving them in a positive direction. So what I tell parents that when you're talking to your adult child, you should not give advice. And that's really, really easier said than done. But you have to step back and you have to ask them questions. So the way I ask questions, the best types of questions you can ask to your adult child start with the words what and how. The reason why I like those questions specifically, especially what questions, is because it makes them reflect. It makes them think, right? What type of job would be fulfilling for you? What would freedom look like for you? What would it look like if you lived in alignment? What would your future self be proud of? That's a great question to ask. That's a great question to ask. So the reason why I like that, the what questions, is because, again, if I say, what would your future self be proud of? Your brain is like a computer. It's going to come up with something. And that could be something as simple as, I'm going to work out today, or I'm going to, reach out to someone for a job or an application or something along those lines. And so by doing that, when they have to come up with the answer, then they have buy-in. And that's what I love about what questions, right? Is that they have buy-in. They came up with the answer. Well, I guess I should, reach out to so-and-so. Oh, right? So they come up with the answer, they have buy-in, and guess what? Because they come up with the answer, they're more likely to act. But we also see this in work environments too, right? We see this in all types of environments where you have an idea, but you can't give the idea. You have to have them come up with it. This is the best way to do it. So what and how questions. You can say, how would it feel to do such and such, right? What feels right to you right now? What do you feel is missing in your life? Again, all reflective questions. The key challenge for doing those questions is you have to be in a calm state, right? You can't present those with any judgment, and you may have to have several of these conversations, but you have to be in a calm state because they're going to catch your vibe. And if you're not in a calm state and they're not in a calm state, then it's not going to go well. So sorry, you just asked for an introduction and I just like talked for a long time.
Not at all. Not at all, Evan. In fact, I was listening to it, and most of the things are so correct. In fact, a lot of people will think that, yes, it is all correct. And a lot of people will, no, we know it, but somehow, it's a different world altogether on the ground. For example, if we understand it from a common person's perspective, sometimes they will think, till yesterday, the same person, we have been in the same house for so long. Until yesterday, we were the best parents in the world. We were the most educated parents in the world. And suddenly, this person suddenly thinks he or she is an adult and feels our advice like pressure. And they find it, for parents, children are still children. They somehow don't get that thing to understand that the world has changed. Why does their advice suddenly feel like pressure? What has changed actually on the ground, especially for people, they are emotional about their children. No, they will find it difficult to understand at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of development going on. I mean, they say the brain doesn't even fully develop till you're 26, right? So think of that. And I've watched some people say that adolescence even continues to the, early 30s. So I think there's a lot of growing and developing. And I think that the challenge that, Gen Z particularly has is that they've probably seen their, parents grind and not make it. And they're like, why would I give up my life? Why would I give up my time for a company that's not going to reward me? Right? So they already feel out of alignment with what they do. So that's why you really need to have questions, reflective questions. I actually have a whole PDF, over 60 pages of reflective prompts just for graduates that can get them in touch with what they really want. I think this takes a lot of effort and a lot of reflection. I mean, in an ideal world, they would go through those PDFs and write and reflect on what feels in alignment to them. And I think it's just a really hard time with, the job market in America is not great right now. And so it's hard to find jobs. It's hard to see a path forward. And they just feel out of alignment. And that's the biggest key is that, we all want our kids to be happy, but we want them to feel aligned with their purpose and aligned with their direction. We want, we really want three things for them. We want, them to have money, purpose, and live independently. Those are the things that we want for our children. But it's just, I mean, it's always been hard to be in your 20s, but it doesn't get any easier with, societal pressures of you have to be, married by this, age, and you have to have kids by this age, and you should know exactly what you want to do in your 20s. I don't think that's practical or reasonable. I think that what I encourage parents to do is to follow their adult child's lead. If they find something interesting, right, pursue that. Right? The 20s is the great time of experimentation. This is when they have the lowest risk profile that they will ever have, right? They probably don't have kids. They probably don't have a mortgage, right? They're probably not married. So let the 20s be an age of exploring. I call it messy action, because as long as they're doing something that's giving them purpose, even if it's the wrong direction, then they'll learn something from that. I mean, I remember my kids growing up. My son went through soccer, football, badminton, right? Baseball. Like, he went through at least 5 or 6 different sports until he found rowing. And we encourage that when they're kids, right? Figure out what you like, what resonates with you. But in their 20s, we're like, oh, no, you can't do that now. And I think that that's one of the hard things is, like, we as parents have to adjust our expectations a bit and be more lenient.
Absolutely. So, when your kids grow up into their 20s, who is under more pressure, your kids or the parents?
It's hard to say, right? Because, like, if you're financially supporting them, right, that can be very difficult, right? I'm actually doing a video this week. I'm editing it this week, so it'll be on my YouTube channel probably by the time this airs. And it's about how to have, like, what to do when your adult child is at home and you want them to move forward. And part of the conversation is, the money conversation, which is the dreaded conversation in any household, right? It's like the third rail. You don't want to talk about it, but you have to, right? So if you're supporting your, adult children financially, but you want them to be independent, how do you have that conversation, especially if they're living at home? And I'll give you a preview of the video. I talk about, don't call it the money conversation, call it the contribution conversation. So if they're living at home, you can ask them, what would a contribution look like to you? It can be in terms of money or chores or a combination, right? So maybe they have to clean the bathrooms, right? Maybe they have to take out the trash. Maybe they have to empty the dishwasher. Maybe they have to walk the dogs, something like that. Or maybe it's like they put in $300 a month. They pay you $300 a month, right? And it can be a variety of things. It really depends on your personal, financial situation. But that's what I encourage them to say is like, you want to treat them. You say, listen, I can't treat you like a kid anymore. I have to treat you like an adult. And so you need some sort of level of contribution here. What do you think sounds best? Again, the what question. Because if they come up with it, then they're more likely to do it. So, and then the little secret in there is that, let's say they're paying you $300 a month, right? You put that in a separate account so that when they leave, you give it to them as a gift, because they probably need that for a security deposit or something like that. So, those are the things that, it's just very difficult to have those conversations. And that's why I really want to guide parents on how to have those conversations.
Absolutely. In terms of, you talk about psychological safety as a game changer. What is this psychological safety between, such close relationships? They are parents and children, and everyone was secure till the other day. And suddenly we talk about psychological safety. Help us understand psychological safety here.
Sure. So psychological safety is really making sure that they feel comfortable talking to you. And they feel comfortable. They know that they're not going to be met with judgment or pressure. And again, that's why I give parents tips on how to have those types of conversations. And the reason why that's important is because think of it, like if you don't feel psychologically safe around someone, you're going to close up. You're not going to tell them everything. And I don't expect kids to tell us everything, right? Because that's probably not reasonable. They have to have their own lives. But I think psychological safety is really about being calm, being centered, not being overreactive, not yelling. Those sort of things, when they know, if you walk into your boss's office and you don't know whether they're going to run hot or cold, whether they're going to yell at you or whether they're going to be nice to you, you don't feel safe around them. It's one of the biggest lessons I learned in corporate is I would have some bosses that I would not feel safe around. I had one boss, I would go into his office. I felt like a therapy session. It felt great, right? But you have to have that calm and that centeredness. And that's very hard to do when you're frantic. So if you're frantic during the week, it's not the best time to have a conversation with them, right? I really encourage people to go for a walk before they have these conversations, or to do some form of exercise, whether it's cycling, weightlifting, running, whatever their chosen sport is. But you want to be in that calm state, because that's going to lay the foundation. And so that's what I'm talking about with psychological safety. You want to make them feel safe so that they can come to you with anything. And I even had this with my daughter recently, where I've always, told her that I could, that she would be safe to tell me things. And even though I told her that, and we had a good relationship, there were some things that she felt very hard to tell me. It took her a lot of courage to do that. And kudos to her, she journaled that, right? She wrote all that out before she came to me. So again, psychological safety is just making sure that they feel like you're on the same team. If you're always butting heads, it's hard to have that psychological safety. And when they have that psychological safety, that's when they're going to open up. And it takes time. Another tip I'll give the viewers is that one of the best times to have these conversations is in the car, because you're not looking at each other, so that releases the tension, and you're usually in a calm state. I mean, barring traffic and all that sort of stuff, but but you're usually not frantic running around, and they can't escape, and you can't escape. Right? I mean, some of the best conversations I've had with my daughter is when she's actually in the back seat. Right? My wife and I are up in the front seat and she's in the back seat, and she just starts talking and talking and talking because she feels safe.
Absolutely, Evan. So, when do you come into the picture? When does new Grad Launchpad comes into the picture?
I come into the picture when parents really need guidance on how to help their adult child. When they're really struggling, I have this one woman who came to me and she said, my my daughter's living in San Diego in the apartment that I'm funding, and and she treats me with disrespect. And so when you don't know how to have those conversations, that's when you come to me. You also come to me, also, I love to work with the adult child as well. I have coaching programs, and in 90 days, I've seen it over and over and over again where people make massive shifts in how they show up. And so it's either the parents who are having problems parenting. If they have a good parent-child, relationship, good dynamic, then I just may work with the adult child and help them figure out what they want to do. And they feel safer coming to somebody like me because I'm not going to steer them in a direction, right? I'm not going to say, you should go to grad school, you should be a plumber, right? I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Again, open-ended questions are the way that we work. And we also work on their limiting beliefs. They may have limiting beliefs that are holding them back or interpreting the situation incorrectly. So there's lots of things that you can unpack there with the adult child about like how they're showing up and what these limiting beliefs are and how to correct them. So that's when parents should come to me, either when they're struggling with their own limiting beliefs or their parent-child dynamic, or the adult child is struggling to get launched.
Right. But if it's possible, give us a couple of examples how dynamics are on the ground and how you are helping. Something that will, help people to understand it better.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you, a situation from my own life, right? My daughter, announced, a few months ago that she was going to leave school and that it wasn't working for her. And so those were difficult conversations to have. But I was able to help her through that because I was asking her the reflective questions. And so I'm really excited. She's going to be a dog trainer, and that's what she wants to do. And that's what she figured out her path is. But the way it works on the ground is like I coach the parent on how to have these conversations, because you have to set up the right dynamic. But I can also coach the adult child in what they want to do. So that's just an example of, from my own life of like, and something I'm proud of really, is that I got her, she felt psychologically safe. She didn't feel safe to tell me that she wanted to leave school. But when she did, right, she knew that I was going to be supportive and I was going to be there for her. And I know a lot of parents and a lot of her friends want to drop out of college, but their parents are not going to be supportive of their path. And so I think it's really important for parents to understand that they are on their own path. They're not on your path. And so, some of the work that I've done is just like helping them overcome limiting beliefs about themselves. A lot of, I had a client who just like, she just didn't think she was smart enough, right? She didn't think that she was good enough. She had these strong limiting beliefs that were holding her back from pursuing her passion, pursuing what she really wanted to do, right? Which was something in the medical field. But she didn't think that she was smart enough to do it. And we had to work on that and overcome that limiting belief. And once she was able to do that, then she was able to find her purpose.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much to learn about all these things from you, Evan, and I'm sure a lot of parents, a lot of young adults also, adult would want to connect with you, learn more from you, about you, and also if your services are available online, what's the best way for them to do so?
You can go on LinkedIn, Evan Sanchez. I'll come right up. That's the best way. You can go to my YouTube channel, New Grad Launchpad. I'm really building it out, so I would love for people to like and subscribe as with all YouTube channels. And those are the best ways to get in touch with me. There are links in the descriptions. I'm very easy to reach and more than happy to help because I know what a difficult time a lot of these parents are dealing with.
Absolutely. With this, it's set up on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.